It is Smooth, the 98.1. Love music, love life. You are welcome to the Smooth Book Review Show. My name is Judith Atibi, and you are welcome. It's a beautiful Saturday morning here in the city of Lagos. The weather is kind of bipolar and confused. It doesn't know whether to be cloudy or sunny or rain. Well, that's the usual, given that it's the month of July. You're welcome to the show. As always on the Smooth Book Review Show, what we do is we bring you literature like never before. A Saturday serving of the very best of African literature for you. I'm talking prose, drama, poetry, and maybe nonfiction, because that's what we're doing today on the show. My name is Judith Atibi, like I said earlier, and you are welcome to the show. Today is my very first time that I will be doing this. This is a completely different episode. I've never done this before, and I am so pumped up and excited to do this on the show. Never have I ever reviewed a nonfiction book on the show. I've never done it before. And so to do that, I need something to spur me, something to, get my juices, my creativity, just something that's beyond ordinary, something we've never seen before. And this book that we're about to review raised the bar when it comes to nonfiction writing, and this time even memoirs. I'm talking about the book Aftershocks, Dispatches of the Front Lines of Identity by Nadia Owusu. And joining me today to review this book is a very special guest. She also owns a book club, and she's quite beautiful, if I say so, my chef. Joining me is Sade. You can find her on Instagram. She's at SBC_book club. Sade, welcome.
Hi guys.
Hey. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
It's very early, but I'm here.
I know. And this is the reason why I give you guys props. Any single person who comes on the book review early in the morning, whether virtually or come here physically, I always tell you guys, thank you so much and well done, because it's passion to be here. It's not. I was dragging myself out of bed this one. It's like, I don't have. Same. Why do I have to work?
But I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Now you can join us as well and send us a WhatsApp message. Engage with us here in the studio as we will be, reviewing this book and discussing this book. This book is such a good book. Oh my God. I say this with all the books, but I never lie, guys. I never lie. I always give it to you. Now. Anyway, so join the conversation. Send me a WhatsApp message to 0809 444 0981. Again, 0809 444 0981. That's our WhatsApp number for you to engage with us here in the studio. You can also call us up on our telephone line on 01 448 9981. Again, 01 448 9981. All right, that's our telephone line. So let's get started, shall we? Shade, you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. So, Aftershocks is a memoir by Nadia Owusu. This is her very first full-length book at all, and it's such a vulnerable. Goodness, the words, man. I'm going to be using words, people. Listen up. It's such a good book. Now, Nadia, the blurb of the book, I'm going to read the blurb of the book, but I'll let Sade go in depth for us. But from the blurb of the book, it goes, when Nadia Owusu was 2 years old, her mother abandoned her and her baby sister and fled from Tanzania back to the US. When she was 13, her beloved Ghanaian father died of cancer. Nadia Owusu is a woman of many languages, homelands and identities. She grew up in Rome, Dar es Salaam, Addis Ababa, Kumasi, Kampala, and London, and for every new place there was a new language, a new identity, and a new home. At times she has felt stateless, motherless, and identityless. At others, she has had multiple identities at war within herself. It's no wonder that she started to feel fault lines in herself, or in a sense of self, and it's no wonder those fault lines eventually ruptured. Aftershocks is our account of how she hauled herself out of the wreckage. It is the intimate story behind the news of immigration and division dominating contemporary politics, Nadia Owusu's astonishingly moving and incredibly timely memoir is a nuanced portrait of globalization from the inside in a fractured world in crisis. And I couldn't. This is in all the years I've been reading literature, and in the year I've been doing this show, this is by far a wonderful blurb. There's some blurbs I get, I'm like, what? But this is, I mean, it is what it is. You get it. But I'm going to let you to go into details and give us the plot of this book.
I think she also does a really good job at saying on the cover page of saying this is dispatches from the front lines of identity. I'd say for me this book is like Nadia's way of processing like the trauma of everything she has been through. Dealing with her own trauma, dealing with like generational trauma like from her parents, and like as you said, like she is a UN baby, so she's had to like move around a lot, and have to grapple with being mixed as well. And there's always that whole conversation around when you're mixed, like, do I identify as black or white? And a lot of times, like the default is black, and her trying to like navigate spaces wherever she goes. So when she's in Africa, like having to deal with that when she's like in the UK, in the US, or in other parts of Europe, like trying to place where she should be, and you sort of see her having to like shape shift each time. And again, grapple with what exactly, like, who am I, what am I, and like what is my place in this world. And yeah, I think she does a very good job. And again, because I think she is like processing her trauma and like dealing with so much grief, and there's all these sections, as you know, when you read the book of the blue chair, where she's clearly using that as like, it's like this like moment of pause and reflection of every single big chapter of what has happened in her life. And it's written in a non-linear way, which again is very interesting, because when we think about history or like memory, people think that everything is always a straight line, but it's not always a straight line. And even the history is only so much. Is I'm sure if there was maybe one of her siblings had the chance to write their own book, their stories would probably not even be exactly the same. So it's always interesting to see how same people can be in the same experience and they take away different things.
But
it's
absolutely.
A very interesting memoir.
It's a wonderful memoir. Another thing that was, when I started reading this book, what came to mind was her vulnerability and how she was able to wield that as a tool to write this book. And in times like this where vulnerability is sort of like, now it's been accepted, but before it's something that you don't speak up about. Vulnerability is weakness. I can only imagine, the places that she had to go through within herself to write it, especially the blue chair, that chapter. It's wild when I read this book. Now, let's go into some of the themes of this book, because honestly, I could talk about characters, but again, it's somebody's story, right? So we can only talk about it from our own perspective, right? If it was a fiction book, we would talk about the characters and going nuance as to how. But again, this is someone's story, and even if she's put it out there, you're not going to be as nuanced as the person who's telling the story, right? But the relationships that were in this story was quite interesting. A father, Ghanaian father, who, in our eyes, she adored her father. Like, when she writes about her dad, you can tell that she adores her dad, just the way like any African or Nigerian girl would adore. It meant everything to her. And it was in that, trying to reconcile what had happened to him was what, kind of spurred a grief that she had, and she was trying to go through. Of course, the blue chair comes in, but also the relationship with her stepmother, that was really interesting for me. And I'm going to just put my 2 cents there. Maybe you can add your bit of it. The relationship with her stepmother was really flawed. And before that, I need to put it out there that she was abandoned at the age 2. She's Ghanaian. Her father is Ghanaian. Her mother is Armenian American. and her mother abandoned her at 2 years old with a younger sister, Yasmin, who's 1 year old, and she leaves, right? And so for the father to be able to cope, given that he worked in the UN agency, he had to take his daughter and his daughters and send them to England to live with his older sister or younger sister, whilst he was able to, navigate, this separation. Because again, you're being separated from your wife, and now you have to navigate that separation and then navigate being a single father, having daughters who are 2 and 1. It would be difficult for him. And also, he still has to, sort out his love life. And so I get, where the father was coming from, right? And then when she finally is introduced to her stepmother, that was not a good relationship from the get-go, right? And I was listening to a podcast of her talking about, that relationship.
Okay.
And she was saying about how, as from a young, like when she first met her stepmother, she thought, she's an adult, right? But then she realized years later that adult she was looking at was 22, 23. And so in that way, if you read the book, you think that she kind of like made the stepmother a villain, right? And she said that I need a villain, right? And I do not care who. This is my story, right? And then you are going to read this, but this is my story, and I'm going to make this woman a villain, right? And she did all through, right? The relationship was strained. She hated sharing her father with another woman. Exactly. Yasmin, on the other hand, was a 1-year-old girl who, by the time she had met her stepmother, was about 3 years old, wanted a mother. And so she'd always look for mothers in strangers and people, call random people mom. But she was talking about that relationship, and it made me ask myself questions. Can memoirs put other persons, the other sides of other people, their own views? Because this is a very nuanced, take on, politics, on trauma, on, so many things, bloodline, family, identity, so many things are going on inside the book. But also, when she started talking, when I listened to the podcast and she was talking about her stepmother, she was like, look, my stepmother was 22, 23. So she was a very young woman who also wasn't self-aware or had come into her own. And it made me wonder, so if you knew this, why did you write her like this in this book?
Because I imagine that is because it's that thing of non-linearness. You have to write as if she was still that 14-year-old and seeing her as different. Like, if she wrote it in a linear way, then she would just be talking about, well, now, like, that was who she was, but I've now come and realized that actually she was this full-fledged human being and nobody is perfect, which probably isn't that interesting. So she has to, at least that's what I've been able to take, is that because she had to write, when she goes back and forth in her story, like, she has to write as a 9-year-old, and this is what the 9-year-old was thinking. She has to write as the 14-year-old, and this is what the 14-year-old was thinking, or 21-year-old. But I think at the end of the day, at least what I took away as well, that you see that she clearly writes with empathy. Or even though the stepmother had to be the villain, it's not, again, this damnation of this woman is just bad. I feel like for each character in the story, particularly the parents, so her mom, the dad, and the stepmother, she comes to realize that these people are indeed like individuals and they are not perfect. And I think that's also part of like growth for all of us as we grow older. It's very easy thinking very like binary, like either you're a good person or a bad person. And then the older you get, you start to realize that nobody is perfect and we are all living in the gray. And I think that that's what she tries to do in this story. I think that's what she does.
It's really interesting. One of the things that she does really beautifully, and honest to God, I when I got to that part, I was like, Jesus Christ, who is this woman? And it was blood trauma. The way she explores trauma is mind-blowing, and I've never seen anything like this in such a long time, and it felt really good to like read it. In fact, I read that chapter twice. I went back and I continued to read it because the way she You know what? We're going to take a break here. But this is the Smooth Book Review. My name is Judith Atibi. My guest is Sade. She's on Instagram at SBC_book club. We're reviewing the book Aftershocks by Nadia Owusu. We're going to take a short break here. When we come back on the other side, we explore trauma, identity, and a chapter called Colonial Mentality. Stay with us. There's not enough time. We have to go right in. This is a Smooth Book Review show right here on Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life. My name is Judith Atibi. Welcome back to the second leg of the show. If you're just joining us here quite in time, my guest today is Sade. She's on Instagram at SBC_book club. We're reviewing the book Aftershocks by Nadia Owusu. It explores her life. It's a memoir, non-fiction novel. It explores her life navigating identity, navigating abandonment, parental abandonment, a loss of a father, grief, trauma, and so much more is embedded inside of this book. Before the break, we're talking about, the character and relationship between herself and a stepmother, and, how writing memoirs could writing it from your point of view, even as nuanced as it can be, sometimes it's how you see it, and some persons might take away things from it, but at the end of the day, that's one thing about life. It's not, linear. Now, before the break, I was talking about the chapters in the book, and we have, colonial mentality, we have photography, we have naval. Oh goodness, there's the blue cheer, there's blood trauma, eggs. So many chapters in this book that if she had posted them as an essay on a blog every single day,
so much traction.
Chai.
What do people use these days? Like Medium or like Substack?
Chai. Listen, I was telling her before the break that somebody should give Nadia her points. This book, this is a good, nicely written, nicely done, wonderfully written. But one of the things she explores in this book was trauma. The trauma of being abandoned as a child at 2 years old. Such a very unique age. It's that time between toddler and still, and you're a toddler, right? You're just learning to walk, and that's when you need your mother. In fact, you need your mother most in all parts of your life.
Yeah.
You're abandoned by your mother. And she goes to live with her aunt, and she comes back as well, and she tries to explain that cycle. She goes back in time to her family's life, to her mother's line, to explain that cycle. In fact, in this book, she asked her father, "Why did my mother abandon me?"
Mm-hmm.
And then her father said, "Because there's trauma in their blood." And I was like, "What? Wait, what?" And then he goes in depth, and she goes in depth to explain that. In fact, and she said she thought you were better off with me. He said she was not ready to be your mother. And she asked why, and he replied, "There's no simple answer. Your mother grew up in a family that lost everything, and the trauma is in her blood. I think that's what made her live." Now, when you go in depth into that chapter, she goes on to discuss the effect of war, a genocide, of a war-torn Armenia, for our parents or our lineage, our mother's people having to leave their homestead and migrate into the desert and trying to get into America. And she explains that, right? And it's such a wonderful take on trauma, don't you think so?
I think so. I think we don't acknowledge enough, and I would say specifically as Black people living in Africa, the amount of trauma that we are all still living through, and how much it's made us to just constantly be in survival mode. But the thing about being in survival mode is I don't know how much time you then get to process that trauma. I think the people who are lucky are the people who are probably now have crossed over to quote unquote living. So you're no more in survival mode, you're now living. But yeah, I think that as Africans we've had to suppress so much in order to just keep surviving, because if you have to unpack everything, I don't know how long it's going to take.
In fact, she goes on to not just talk about trauma, but she explained how trauma is in your blood. And how, in fact, let me even just take that chapter, because there's no point of me saying it than to explain and to read it verbatim from the book. And she was explaining about, her parent, how they had to, how her Armenian side of the family had to migrate from Armenia all the way to America. And she was talking about an aunt who was abandoned 3 times in the desert, and how one time they were like, we should kill her. We should just kill her, because her screams is going to get us, And then too many times it was, her abandonment was not because they wanted to abandon her. I think twice the mother was so caught up in her own issue that she forgot her child. And in that chapter, I'm trying to find this thing. Oh my goodness. Trauma? Yes. Okay, I found it. I'm trying to look for that point. And she goes, my abandonment were not the same as my aunt Erica's. There was never any threat of starvation, of typhoid, of death in the desert, but still a pattern. The trauma had been diluted by time. It was present, still discernible in my blood. Much of my 20s were spent in a thick fog of the mind. When the fog got too thick to see out of, I often turned to reading and writing mostly about mental health, illness, and paid attention to studies of orphans and abandonment. Now, before that, she said, a study from the New York's Mount Sinai Hospital found that genetic changes stemming from the trauma suffered by Holocaust survivors were capable of being passed on to their children. And that blew my mind. And she goes on to say, our genes change all the time when chemical tags attach themselves to the DNA and turn genes on and off. The study found that some of these tags were found in the genes of those survivors and were also found in their children. The changes led to an increased incidence of stress disorders. This passing down of environmental altered genes is called epigenetic inheritance. And so it blew my mind. I'm like, you turn to science to explain trauma?
There's so many answers in science, right? Like, I think sometimes we just try to, try to make everything spiritual. But
I know.
There's so much.
My co-host is always backing on my head about it. When I tell him science will save us all, I strongly believe in science, and I think that science is the way forward. I don't think prayer is everything, and we stop needing spiritual. So Judith, I really think there's something wrong with you.
I think you need both, because I don't, if you believe that God created us, then he created science as well. So why would you dispel of that? It's like one of our highest forms of our creativity as well. Like, human beings have used their minds to understand all these things. Like, why would you throw that away as well?
Yeah, but the passing down of trauma in the blood, and her explaining this, in such a wonderful way, just makes you very introspective as to how trauma is a cycle.
It is.
And how it just goes around and round in circle, and it just never ends, right? And she also uses that point to explain why maybe she doesn't want kids.
Yeah, so I think motherhood is clearly like a huge theme in this as well. And I remember coming to the end of the book and realizing that motherhood is not just about like birthing the child. That is basically what she's covering here, is that it's about that nurturing. And it made me understand her mother more, because I think what Nadia through this book had to realize is that you have to first mother yourself before you can mother anyone. And mothering is a verb. I think she writes it somewhere. It's actually a doing thing. And I think she does that through, again, the Blue Chair chapters, where she realizes that she must first be able to be somewhat whole for herself in order to be whole for anybody else. And I think it made her kind of understand her mom, because it's, again, quite clear that this person has not been able to even fully mother themselves and deal with all this generational trauma and all of that. So it becomes very difficult to then not just one, but 2 children. Then you have to then expand that too. So if you already have 20%, you now have to give that remaining 20% to your 2 children. So that's 10%, and that's what they got.
Yeah.
Because if you then had maybe 100%, then give maybe 50% and split it. But like the less you have, then the less you can give out. I think that was the way I was able to.
Yeah, I think so too. I think parenting is such, there's no rule book to it, and you have to be a wholesome person. But can you be wholesome?
There's a whole like conversation that we usually have in book club, because we read a lot of books that seem to have this theme about mother-daughter relationships, and it's interesting here that they've said again that it's one of the most interesting relationships because it's the first one that kind of forms your view. I mean, no offense to that, but like it informs your view of how you are going to relate with everyone, especially as women. And I think it's very difficult because women are very much defined by all the things that you're first like a mother, a sister, friend, and this is that before you are like yourself.
Yes.
And I think it's something that we're all as women struggling with, because again, you are first defined as all these things that you have to give to the world before you are defined as like who you are, and that must be very difficult to navigate. Especially with someone who then has to deal with things like blood trauma and like going through whole like Armenian genocide, all of that, compounded over and over and over again.
And it sort of humanized the mother.
Yeah.
You know, because she never came back for the daughters. And in Nigeria, in our society, that would be demonized.
It's demonized everywhere. I think even these stories, I don't know if you've ever read Patsy.
No, I've not.
I think that was the first time I'd really seen like that thing of the mother leaving. So in that story, the mother leaves Jamaica? Yeah. She leaves, and she leaves her daughter with her mother, so the child's grandmother, to look for a better life. And I don't know, I think what this has also made me think about is, why do we demonize someone who is able to actively believe that this child is going to get far much better than I can give them? That in a way, like, isn't that kind of selfless? Like, if you know that you are so self-aware that you know that you can't give this person the best, and you're willing to let them be with someone else that can give them the best, like, is that really a bad thing? I don't know what the answer to that is, but I mean, like, is that really?
But that's mothering, because if you cannot give your child what you ought to give as a mother, giving them to the best person who can provide that thing that you cannot give, is that not still being a mother?
Yeah.
But again, that's a question that everyone else needs to ask. Your favorite chapter in the book is colonial mentality. Yeah. So I'm going to leave you to do the honors and talk about it.
So I think that chapter discusses, again, things around like memory and history and how we choose to remember history. So I think she's talking a lot about what her grandfather, a lot of the conversations reflecting on her conversations with her
and even from a Ghanaian side, she explores her Ghanaian roots there.
Yeah. And I think she says, I think her grandfather says, like, history is just a story, is what you're told. And what you're told is depending on who is writing it. And they put in what they want, and, you know, they leave out what they want, and they decide where the emphasis goes. But we are not acquitted. Our people, you know, it's basically, again, the grandfather is kind of talking about this thing of when we are constantly discussing Africa and our story and everything, is always demonizing the Europeans. And that's fair enough, but there's not enough conversation being had about the fact that African people sold their own people willingly.
I'm so glad you said this,
with
because
full knowledge of the consequences.
Because I think, was it Thursday or Wednesday? I think it was Thursday. So Oluwaseun would have just left her show. She was downstairs and she was listening to some poem about slavery and how this person, how, you know, Africans were carted off into slavery. This person was doing this spoken word piece. And I started laughing, and she's like, why are you laughing? I was like, oh my goodness, what are the odds that I just finished reading a chapter when somebody was questioning that narrative, that, you know, slavery was so one-sided, that we as Africans didn't partake in that, in that venture, that in it and of itself was a booming business.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a business that the chiefs and the clan heads of our communities were thriving on. You know, and one of the richest families, or the upper class, or the upper echelon of the African society, you know, they thrived. That was what
till now.
Till
that's
now.
not discussed.
And that's not being discussed, And she was like, her face was like, oh, Judith, you start. Because whenever I start this thing, they'd be like, Judith, you have come again. But I was like, I don't know. It's in a book. Why don't you go pick it up and read it? But it was quite an interesting and really bold, I would say.
Yeah, because maybe it's since moving back. It's very interesting to see, like, by the time you sit down and read, just how much nothing has really changed. And I won't want to speak for Ghana because I don't know their history very well, but for like Nigeria, when you sit down and realize that not much has really changed. And that's probably because of all these things, like refusing to confront the past, probably not even knowing the history. And I think these things are all done on purpose anyway, because how else are you going to keep the people oppressed, like, if they don't know the truth?
And oppression is a tool.
Yeah.
It's such a tool that's power, and she also explores this, right? And how in gaining independence, we're still very much dependent.
Even the independence, right? I think she talks about Kwame Nkrumah, and I think it's similar.
It was so beautiful, because for a very long time, Kwame has been, put to be this idol, but the truth is, the queen was his idol.
They all had very what we would class now as quote unquote problematic views, and even like things like independence, like a lot of it was fought by. And that's not to say that there was still a lot of it not fought by the masses, but a lot of it was fought by the people who were like closest to the Europeans and just kind of wanted that power. Yes. But we won't discuss it like that. We'll say, we're fighting for
everybody. Exactly,
like,
but it was a selfish. It was a selfish thing.
It's my money, okay? Actually, I want that money, and and I think she does an interesting thing here, because again, and I will only speak for Nigeria, when people are discussing like the heroes past and all of that, it's very they were so great, but they did so many bad things.
Indeed, they did so many bad things, and one can. I'm looking for a part in this book that that really was so. Is it colonial mentality? I think it was.
Yeah, is it where she talks about is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others and measuring one's soul by the tip of the world that looks in amused contempt. So that was Du Bois wrote that. And then she writes about, but this double consciousness is true of Africans as well as related to colonial mentality. It is related to my father being called Charles and Jose. It is related to my grandfather eating fufu with a spoon. It is related with the pride of being Ashanti and the shame of being Bush. And then she goes on about things about during colonization, you had to abandon all these rule of law and things and embrace other things. I think she was mentioning, like, she was watching TV and she saw like the lawyers wearing like white wig,
and then she just like she lost it and she started laughing and fell off on the floor from a chair. And this takes me to the next question, our next conversation about identity. And before the break, we were talking about how biracial kids must have it tough, and hers was extra difficult, and we don't discuss about this enough. One of the tenets of childbearing is stability. And she didn't have that. Yeah. She was moved because of the nature of her father's job, having to be working one of the UN agencies. She constantly was on the move, constantly had to change school, constantly had to be a new kid in a school, in another school. And then you now have this identity where you're not exactly too white, but you're not exactly black enough, And when you go to Ghana, which you've always identified as Ghanaian, you don't speak the language and you look too fair-skinned to be Ghanaian, right? And then with your Armenian side of the family, you are the black kid, So there's this always in between for her.
No, I think that's true. And I think even the identity, like listening to the stuff that you've said so far, even the whole identity politics also has to do with another theme that she explores here, which is what is home. I think the final chapter is called Home. And, you decide that like your identity and what you call home is very much based on like what is on the outside and what is appearing. And okay, because you are black, Africa is your home. Because you are white, like, I don't know, England is your home or whatever. And yeah, it's a very tricky one. Again, very back tricky. To the thing of when you are living in such a binary world, it must be a lot of cognitive dissonance, because it's like, okay, I'm enjoying these privileges because I'm sure it's the same thing she probably would come to Ghana and like she's enjoying these privileges,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time people are telling her like, oh, you speak a certain way, you don't really belong here. So is this my home only if I'm able to blend in and speak the language, and like what does that even mean? And I think she even seems to live in a lot of like very urban, multi-ethnic areas.
Yes.
So again, there's that question of, even here, like if you take like Lagos, like what really is Lagos? Because I feel like everybody has a very different Lagos, but then it's presented as if, oh, you now have to go and like, you go on your state of origin or whatever, and you have to say like, I'm from Lagos. But what does that even really mean?
And we have this liner here that goes, my Lagos.
Yeah.
It's really a fast. I'm so glad you're saying this, because I always listen to it and I'd be like, I've spent my life here.
Mm-hmm.
I was born here, raised here. In fact, I don't speak the language, but I'm as Lagos. In fact, when I go somewhere else, I'm always referred to as a Lagosian. But the Lagosians wouldn't take me. I'm not from Lagos, right? But I was born here. So it made me wonder. I'm recording. It made me wonder if, and then just to take it back to what you said, is like, what gives?
What really is? Like, who is the gatekeeper of, like, who is?
And gatekeeping of identity, right? Yeah. And that's the social conditioning and construct that we've created for ourselves. Yeah. In this binary way to look at things. And it must be hard for biracial kids. It's harder for them,
Unfortunately, I'm not. I wouldn't even begin to know, but from the outside, it looks like it's very difficult, because even just like little things, like for me now, going abroad and then coming back here, there's
just a culture shock.
Yeah, like people still treat you very differently. Yeah. Like, it's very weird, because like there's like when you are worrying more about things like, how are people going to treat me because I'm black? Here you then have to think about how are people going to treat you by whatever perceived like privilege they believe you have. And it's probably like the same thing again of when you're biracial, like the other are going to be thinking about you in this privilege of whatever you have. Like you have this privilege of this, you have this privilege of that, of being able to like move, but at the same time people seem to need to put people in boxes in order to survive. And it's fair, because I think it goes back to like just how we've evolved as human beings. Like the only way you are able to, people, Homo sapiens, were able to, survive, is that you need to know who your in group and out group, so that you can push those people out and they don't eat you or whatever.
Yes.
So it's very like primal,
exactly. And then now we celebrate fluidity, just we being fluid. We celebrate it, but still we still have to put people in boxes.
I don't know.
We'll have to take a short break here. When we come back on the other side, I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. We're reviewing the book Aftershocks. It's by Nadia Owusu. My name is Judith Atibi. My guest is Sade. Find her on Instagram. She's at SBC_bookscore. Bookscore. Stay with us. Listen to Smooth, the 98.1 Love Music, Love Life. You're welcome back. This is a Smooth book review show for our last leg today. I do have a call here. I'm going to see if I can take that really quickly. Hello? Good morning. Oh, B. Yeah, this is Judith. Yes, you are on the show. It's a Smooth book review show. Yeah, Obi, you can't do this right now. I've gotten your email. I'm going to respond, but we're on air. You can't do inquiries while we're on air, right? Thank you. I get that a lot. I know, I get it a lot. It's really hard. Well, you're on to the Smooth Book Review show. And most people think I should just jump on things, really. They don't know that there's actually a lot of emails and people, like... Yeah. It's really hard.
And it takes time.
It takes time.
To be able to review it.
Yeah. Yeah. Please, Obi, just give me a minute. Anyway, this is a Smooth Book Review show right here on Smooth 98.1 Love Music, Love Life. My name is Judith Atibi. My guest is Sade. You can find her on Instagram. She's at SBC_book club. We're reviewing the book Aftershocks by Nadia Owusu. And I'm going to take an excerpt from the book. This chapter is called The Blue Chair. And it's into two chapters. So there's day 1 and day 2. All right? Ready? Let's do it. Mm-hmm. Day 1. Let's say you find yourself sitting in a blue chair for hours a day. As each day passes, you find it harder and harder to get out of the chair. In the chair, you rock back and forth and mutter to yourself. The chair feels like a coffin. But to be in a coffin is the better alternative. The other alternative being to be in your life. Let's say, in addition to the muttering and the rocking, you also read a great deal about madness. You might have printed a stack of studies from a research database. You might also have gone to the library and borrowed several psychology and psychiatric textbooks and multiple memoirs. You prefer the ones written by people as they were losing their minds, but redemption stories will do. They are, after all, far more published redemption stories. People like a happy ending. People want the cap back on the bottle, the gun unloaded, the foot stepping backward, away from the edge. Reading about madness convinces you that you are, in fact, going mad. But it also makes you feel real. Like what is happening to you is happening to you. Most of the time, you feel as though what is happening to you is happening in someone else's bad dream. In the dream, there is a chair, a blue chair that rocks when you rock it. Everything else, the rest of the world, rocks on its own, and there is no way to make it stop. Let's say that when you do leave the blue chair, you don't really leave the chair. For example, you look at the arm of the chair and you are sitting in it and you are surprised to find that it is made of wood instead of upholstery and it is brown instead of blue. You have no idea how you got into this other chair. You also have no idea how a coffee got into your hand. You do not remember ordering it or paying for it. You do not remember sitting down in the brown wooden chair facing the window that looks out on Canal Street. You do not remember getting out of the blue chair, getting dressed, putting on a coat, walking to the coffee shop. What is that called? That forgetting. What is it? A symptom of what? Let's also say you allowed your body to eat itself, so the spaces between your bones look like valleys. The smell of food, even the smell of plain unbuttered toast, is so strong that vomit rises in your throat. When you force a strong smelling food in your mouth, it tastes like cardboard. You are starving, but you cannot possibly eat. The only thing you bear to consume is alcohol. In fact, you can more than bear it. You need it. Alcohol is now water. You drink water only to flush your system of old alcohol, to make room for more alcohol. Alcohol still tastes the way it's supposed to. Whiskey is whiskey, wine is wine, tequila is tequila, but chicken is cardboard, broccoli is cardboard, chocolate truffles, pizza, hamburgers, cardboard, cardboard, cardboard. If that happened to you, what would you Google? If you discover that your life has been reduced to a series of rot actions, you go to your graduate school classes, to work at a restaurant on West 4th Street, to bars with friends, but the purpose has grown vague. Does not make you numb? As one might expect, it makes you furious. You might punch the door of your bedroom. Your feast might swell with hot blood, but you will barely have made a mark on the outside world. Perhaps then you will try screaming, but that only makes your voice hoarse. No one can hear you. Well, they might hear you, but they will hear only the sound. The sound doesn't carry the weight of meaning. You're listening to Smooth 98.1, Love Music, Love Life. My name is Judith Atibi. Sade, what is going on with your face?
I love it.
I love it too.
I want to be able to read like you.
Oh goodness, I was talking about a chapter. I love the chapter too. We have messages here. This is I don't know what you're talking about. I'm really sorry. This is Gary goes, hello, Judith. I am so deepened enjoying the discussion that I feel immobile. I have workload, though. Please share a link for this book. I will do my best to share it. But you can find the physical book everywhere. Roving Heights have it. I'm sure Terra Culture has it as well. There's so many stores that have it. Go on and grab the book. We're reviewing that. What I just read is an excerpt from the book. It's called Aftershock by Nadia Owusu. Go grab it. My guest today is Sade. You can find her on Instagram. She's at SBC_book club. Sade, before we leave the studio, because we have like 2 minutes out. We're out of time. I could go more on and on and on and keep talking about this book because of how good it is, but we're out of time. But Sade, let's talk about the unwinding of madness.
Because that chapter ends with let madness come, let madness come,
yes.
Let madness come.
I wanted to go to the end, but there's no time. Let madness. She just kept right, and then there was a chapter that I love. Oh,
which one?
There was a part of that I should have read that part where she writes something and then she rips it up, takes it to the bin to throw it away, and she comes back, picks the pieces, rips them up. I think I have to read it. I'm sorry, guys. I have to read it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, guys, I am so sorry, but I have to read that.
So terrified of your own thoughts.
And then she rips it off. She goes back in there, picks it pieces by pieces and rips it up, walks all the way down to the end of the road and goes to throw it at a bin there. It's wild. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's a wonderful way of exploring grief. And it makes you wonder, is grief madness? And isn't grief selfish?
Oh, I don't think grief is selfish. I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary in everything. If you even think about this pandemic, because I remember when I was reviewing this book, I said it felt so poignant to reading, or like almost like divine to read this when I read this, because we were in 2001. We've left the 2020 pandemic, and I think we all thought that the earthquake was the earthquake. That was the big thing. And then we've come into 2021, and now we're all in the aftershocks, because you don't know what's going to happen next anymore. There was a sense of stability in the pandemic. It's like, oh yeah, we're in pandemic. And now it's like you have to deal with all these things. So when is the vaccine going to come? Is the vaccine actually working? Is there another strain? And now everybody seems to be having different kind of like internal politics and like wars happening in country, especially in like there's so many things now that come in the aftershock. And we're like grieving so many things, because you're first grieving whatever you had in like maybe pre-2020, and then now you're still even also grieving the pandemic. And I'm sure there's people who have lost people.
I know.
You've lost all sorts of things. Like you've lost a sense of even like
your job, yourself, what your routine used to be before the pandemic.
I think grief is continuous. I think madness, I think again is part of that thing of we have to question why is madness bad? Like to let go. I think like
because she also said that
just let go and be able to, which I think is part of the grief, because grief is the stage is denial, anger, acceptance, all of that. And I think that is part of the madness. I think every day is madness. And again, if you're living with so much like generation and blood trauma, every day is madness. I mean, Lagos, everything is madness.
It is madness.
Like you wake up and you're like, I cannot believe this. Someone is doing this in traffic or doing that. And I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. I think the important thing is to be able to acknowledge it and know that you're going to move from point A to like point B, which she eventually does again with the blue chairs. Like she starts off in questioning so many things. And I think a lot of us need to have that moment of like questioning the reality of everything. I think the pandemic did that, right?
Yes.
Everyone, if you didn't, then tops as you have to have at some point question everything. For everything from who am I, like what exactly does it mean to be a citizen, with what is going on now and how I'm sure there'll be like vaccine.
I know. I think for the pandemic, for me, I was working at the time, so I was always bombarded with the news, the number of cases, and so many things happening. Because again, I was an essential worker, so that means I was coming to work every single day. So it was life as usual. But at the end of the day, when I go outside to try to get lunch, I realize that we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
We still are in a pandemic. Sade, it's been wonderful having you join me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for
Hope
coming
come
through.
Back again.
Of course you will come back again. Yes, you will come back again. Big shout out to everyone who joined us today on the show. I appreciate you all so much. You guys are the best. For everyone who's asking for the book, Gilbert Musa, I see your message. I'm going to post, the video is going to go live on Facebook pretty soon because we've been recording, and we're going to edit that and put that live on YouTube and of course our Facebook. And also the cover of the book will be posted on our WhatsApp status. So go check out the cover. It's really pretty. You can grab it every day. I'll send links to where you can go read the book. Go get the book because you can get it in Lagos. It's pretty much everywhere. Sade, thank you. You want to plug out? Let them know where they can find you. Of course, I've been plugging you since.
Oh yes, of course. I'm at SBC_book club on Instagram, and we mainly read women authors, and we mainly meet virtually, but are hoping to start meeting in person. And we pick one book and we read it weekly, because I know people tend to struggle if you just say read this 300-page book and come at the 24th and let's discuss. So I tend to break it down into weeks. So you read a couple of chapters, we speak for an hour. It's kind of like therapy. I
love it.
Kind of like therapy.
I know that's wonderful, and I think it's really good for many people who really can't just concentrate to reading and just finish a book. I don't know how I do it with week. I try.
Like the empathy muscle, it works from reading.
Yeah.
So important. Especially in Nigeria where the world is very small. Like best way to escape and learn very quickly is reading. Especially fiction. Oh, Sade, let me give you a trophy. Oh, but we have to go, guys. It's been wonderful being here. I have to leave the studio for Total Football Gang to come in. My name is Judith Atibi. Make sure to catch this show every Saturday from 10 a.m. But I do have to leave to make room for the Total Football guys. It's been wonderful. Find me on Instagram. I am at Judith Atibi on Instagram and everywhere else. For me, it's goodbye. Bye.
Goodbye.
And